Force of Nature, The Dry 2 is out in theaters, sequel to the 2020 Australian thriller. Once again directed by Robert Connolly, once again starring Eric Bana, once again based on a novel by Jane Harper. Now, I have to start by complaining about the title. It's very clear that the movie's title was supposed to be just Force of Nature, and the whole The Dry 2 thing was added by the studio to make sure that the audiences understand it is in fact a sequel. Which first of all makes me sad about the state of the average person's sort of intelligence and the faith in that intelligence by the studio execs, but it also makes me frustrated because they called the film The Dry 2, even though it takes place in a literally rainy mountain forest that is constantly wet. There's not a single dry frame in this movie. Anyway, rant aside, I actually really liked the first film, so I got a bit excited when I learned they made another one. And color me incredibly disappointed because this one is unfortunately much worse and a complete waste of time, if I'm being honest. Eric Bana continues as Aaron Falk, a federal agent who this time around investigates a missing persons case. 5 women went into a wilderness mountain forest area for a company retreat where they sort of go off grid. They leave their phones, they just go on a trail, finding their way to the next camp and the next camp. They got lost, they wandered through the wilderness, and days after, only 4 of them emerge out. Falk tries to interrogate the survivors to learn what happened to the last one, where they lost her, can she possibly be still alive, and he desperately attempts to find her before the heavy rains come in a couple of days and make that a complete impossibility. And as it turns out, he has a particular sort of personal interest because the missing lady was his inside informer. She was providing dirt on the company's corrupt directors. So the story might seem a bit interesting and it starts that way, but quickly becomes apparent that execution just falls flat on its face. The movie commits the biggest sin of all, which is that it's just plain boring. It feels too slow and meandering, not much actually happens. There are long stretches of film which seem inconsequential in the end. There's not a lot of tension or a sense of mystery. There are, once again, flashbacks to Falk's own experiences as a teenager, which technically should be somewhat relevant to the main storyline, but really, if you think about it, are not in the end. There's not a direct connection like in the first film, so in the end those flashbacks felt just like a waste of time. It looks good, I'll give it that. It was shot on location in the actual mountains and forests, so it has that going for it, but really, so what if the plot is just not very engaging? So yeah, I was disappointed. I think there are some good actors in here and there are individual elements that seem like they would be cool, but the entire thing is just less than the sum of its parts, and as a whole, it ends up being rather mediocre.